No matter what happens, no matter the stakes, Ultraman will be there.
Hey guys, congratulations on the film. Decades in the making. I'm wondering what it feels like to actually being able to tell this story to an audience around the world.
It's pretty incredible, especially when you actually get to sit in a theater and see it with people. You know, it was, Netflix has been very supportive and they made it for streaming, but we made this film in the same way that you would any kind of theatrical release. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to sit in an audience or with people who've seen it and then to get feedback, get notes from people online to say what the film means to them is, those things you don't think of when you're making it, but always lovely to hear and to read.
I'm wondering if you could discuss your own sort of connection with the lore of Ultraman and how this story not only fulfills fan expectations, but also personal storytelling journeys.
You know, for me, I was born in Japan and while I was being raised by my grandparents in Japan, like Ultraman was already all around me. And so like to see references even in like mangas outside of Ultraman was a surprise. And then quickly like discovered it on television and all the kids in the neighborhood and school were watching it. So just like any child, you know, in Japan or in Asia, like we grew up with it. And so I have this like nostalgia of that childhood memory and being my first hero. So love the fact that I had this opportunity to share that experience and then let new audience discover Ultraman as well around the world.
Some people are super suspicious about people coming in, the whole notion of taking something from another culture. But often what happens is you actually see a property like this or a character like this, and this leads you to deeper discoveries. I'm just wondering if you could talk about your own emotional, but also as a filmmaker, your direct connection and how Ultraman opened up this entire world of cinema and culture.
Yeah, it actually did that for me. It was Ultraman and Gatchaman, which was called Battle of the Planets, where I grew up, was my first introduction to Japanese culture, and I didn't realize it. And then so it caused an interest in me to kind of pursue it, study the culture. I studied Mandarin in high school and later after college. Study my Japanese is not anywhere near as good as my Mandarin used to be. I understand. Yeah, I understand enough.
You watch so much anime, Japanese cinema.
Yeah, it's true. Or being in a lot of meetings with Eiji Tsuburaya, but it caused an interest to me. So then I started to study the work of Kurosawa and Kobayashi, and watch films from all over the world. So pop culture brought me into a world that I didn't experience growing up in a rural town in Kentucky. And that's what stories can do, right? It invites you in and it makes you curious. And even if you can't afford to physically travel someplace, which is, I think, a big eye opener for people who can, to understand people and cultures better, cinema allows you to do that, in a way where you don't even have to leave your own country, but hopefully it encourages you to get out there and engage with people that are different.
You're referencing Kurosawa. Obviously, we're in a building where, Kurosawa did some incredible work. If you could talk about, because what he did was he obviously bridged gap between this so-called divide between East and West. I'm just wondering how much you incorporated that into this, because you're making an internationally seen film that has incredible notions of specificity from Japan, but also working on a global stage. And if you could just talk about the challenges from a storytelling point of view, but also just a general narrative and directorial.
What's funny too about Kurosawa is he was criticized by Japanese film critics for being too Western.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea behind this and what our goal was and what Tsuburaya's goal was we know that the character is huge in many parts of Asia. So how do we bring this film to the world, but also are representing a culture respectfully? Because we wanted people to see themselves in the film. And so we did it by, first of all, telling a story that we felt was universal, a story of parents and children and the difficulties that they have. And then working with our internal team to make sure that we had the specificities of the culture and the city and what the vibe felt like, to really enrich that experience. So it's not just a big, loud superhero movie.
Yeah. I mean, we work very closely with Tsuburaya, and it was their like opportunity to really bring out Ultraman on the world stage again. And, you know, with the original Eiji Tsuburaya's goals too, it was about having a global, show, and he had other, world members on the series, and to come back around, and have that same opportunity this time on our film, excuse me. It's a great honor. And I, you know, was challenged with like living up to that legacy, but I knew that we were both coming from that childhood connection and heart, and to tell a universal story as a gateway in to draw in the audience and then let them discover Ultraman the way we did as a child.
But there's a fundamental thing in this film, which I think is fascinating, because the film is about making connections between disparate elements. You are literally connecting a kaiju to a hero. You are transforming the way we look at things. And in a fundamental way, you guys bringing an outside perspective to this entire franchise is performing that kind of navigation. How much do these elements ever challenge you in terms of storytellers? Is there an anxiety of, there's one thing to get it right, but just navigating all these various pitfalls? Or is it just at some point in time you have to turn it off and just say, I'm going to make my story my way?
It was never on for me, because the film began, it wasn't an Ultraman story. It was called Made in Japan, and we were going to make it at Sony. And when I parted ways with Sony, but they were very gracious in letting me take that idea out, and we brought it to Netflix. They said, what if we could get you the rights to Ultraman? Because we know it was inspired by Ultraman. So at that point, you're so invested in telling this personal story that I have to find that balance for myself between being a fan and being a filmmaker and telling a story. So the rules were always, if the lore enhances the story that we're telling, it's in, and we will lean all the way into it. If it's distracting from the story, or if it's confusing for people who don't know anything about Ultraman, then it doesn't make it in. And what was really incredible for me is when the film came out is when I first became aware, because people were seeing the teasers and this isn't Ultraman and making these comments. And I've got a really thick skin, but I did want to win them over. And I watched them, many of those folks, we won them over with the film. They were like, look, I know I said these things about the trailer, but whenever I watched the film, I see that there's a deep love and respect for Ultraman. And so I think we were able to find a balance, at least from the response that we've gotten. The majority has been very positive.
We live in interesting times where a lot of fans are so demanding ownership of the characters to have an expectations where they are, that as storytellers, you're obviously conscious of audience expectation, but at some point in time, again, you have to divorce yourself. I'm just wondering if you could talk about any personal challenges in developing this, of not being overwhelmed by what was there and ensuring that you were laser focused on actually making sure that the story is told the way you wanted to tell it, not the way people are asking you to tell it. Notes from the studio or notes from fans. It
was really tapping into what it meant for me. I talked about the nostalgia aspect from my childhood. Ultraman is my childhood hero, the very first one. And to hear what Shannon wanted to do with this theme of parenthood and father and son relationship, and it has a very universal connection, when it comes to family. And it was really about a long discussion about how to infuse our love and what it means to be Ultraman into this. So we were coming from that fandom and from our own heart, and how to convey that idea of what it means to be Ultraman.
Well, you succeed tremendously. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations on the film. And I'm so glad we got to see it in a way that it's meant to be showcased.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.